This is a description of the context of production and how the dream machine upstairs has actually come to be. What did the screen look like when you guys came in? Did you see anything on it?
Yes.
A single circle in the middle?
Yes.
Okay. Good sign. I had to restart it because someone turned off the camera.
Okay.
So it will slowly grow from this point on. So this quote is one chunk of text that I wanted to show because it really highlights my interest in art and how I approach artistic practice. Art is a way of understanding, a way of playing with those signs that make up our reality. Art is playing with ideas, making mistakes, creating processes, learning, and becoming. I have realized I want to make art that lives, to make art that has an existence, a meaning beyond me, the creator. To create work that continues to evolve and is connected to the play of signs from other systems of knowledge. For the piece to live, it has to have a meaning, a place beyond the intentions of the artist. It is not just a manifestation of ideas, but a living entity. It cannot be summed up or reduced to a concept. It is so attached to the systems around it that it would not exist without it. So for me, really what that means is that I'm not interested in the object or the concept in isolation as individual things. That for me, really, you have to have an object that connects. And by connection, I mean it's got symbols in it that refer to things in the world, or it's using content or censor information from its world, or it somehow is informed by a process of knowledge. And in this case, a lot of my work is inspired by technical things like artificial intelligence and computer science, and also things like cognitive science and how science thinks of people in the world and reality and truth. So you can't separate my interests in artistic production from kind of philosophical inquiry at the same time. So what we're going to talk about is situating this particular practice, a trajectory of my artistic works from things that were more, it's kind of funny, I just was thinking traditional electronic media art, but it's not really traditional, it's just 10 years ago instead of now. And then describe dream machine starting from that context. So situating, go on, question.
Yeah, but you have the long test you have written is in 2001.
Yeah.
From 2009 this slide. So
yeah. So that quote was actually written in my second year of my bachelor's of art degree. For the first time, I was asked why I make art. And that was I think that was the introduction. That was just slightly rejigged from that particular essay, which was my first attempt at trying to understand why I was making art. Because at that point, I didn't even think about it. It was the first time somebody asked, the first time I thought about the reason why. It was just always something that was intrinsic somehow to what I was doing, not something I thought about. Does that answer your question? So situating the practice is about the 4 components of artistic practice for me. The first one's conceptual art, where the concept is as or more important than the physical object. Site-specific art, where the artistic object is considered or has to be considered in relationship to the site in which it exists, be that historical, physical, or conceptual. Electronic media art, where technology and art are somehow fused together into one practice. And free software, where I consider the development of technologies as a cultural production, specifically. So I have 3 art pieces that I was going to show as examples of these 3 components. The first is a piece of, I guess this would be traditional interactive art. The ceiling painting, Yes Painting by Yoko Ono, created in 1966, where the purpose of the work is to actually interact with it. You can climb up the ladder, use a magnifying glass to read a word that's on this sheet of paper, typed by typewriter, that just says yes. But of course, since the title of the piece is Yes Painting, you probably already have an idea of what that word would say. So in this case, it's the action of interacting with the work that is the work. And ideally, the physical objects are just a method of interacting with the audience. But one interesting snippet in this case is, at least in this particular case, the object used that was exhibited in 1966 has been collected and fetishized as the artwork. So although it was just a mass-produced chain, mass-produced magnifying glass, and a mass-produced ladder, of which there are probably many of them, that particular collection is actually a traveling exhibition. So even though it's a bit of an antithesis to the work itself, it is actually an object. I don't know what Yoko has to say about that. I never had the opportunity to ask. This is Condensation Cube, a work by Hans Hock, 1963 to 1965. So the first one was site-specific art. Conceptual art, interactive art. This one I'm considering as my own take on site-specific art, but this particular piece is actually normally contextualized within conceptual art, and Hans Hock is known as a conceptual artist. So it's really simple. It's an airtight cube with water in it. Because it's in a sealed environment, if the sun shines through the window of the gallery and heats up the temperature inside the cube, then the outside's colder and the inside's warmer, and you get condensation on the inside of the cube. If there's no sun pointing at it or it's in the shade, then the temperature of the inside and the outside end up being about the same, and there's no condensation. So this is a kind of physical system that literally changes its form. The form of the artwork, the state of the water in the cube actually changes in response to whatever environment it's in. So that's another precedent. This work is called The Giver of Names by David Rokeby, which started in 1990, and he's continuing to work on it to this point. The way this works is there's a pedestal, which is in the background, and in front of the pedestal is a large pile of children's toys. And the audience is invited to put any of these toys on top of the pedestal. Pointed at the pedestal, which we can't really see here, is a video camera which is connected to the computer. So what the work does is try and, using a kind of computer vision thing, the art system tries to understand what is on the pedestal. So it looks at the color and the shape. And using the color and the shape, it actually creates a poem, which is written on the screen, and you actually hear it in a voice synthesis at the same time. So this thing literally writes poems about the things that the audience chooses to put in front of it. And of course, there's nothing stopping the audience to put an object that's in their pocket, or something that wasn't part of the installation initially, and it still works as it makes an attempt to understand that object and make a poem out of it. So the fourth one, that was conceptual art, site-specific art, interactive art, and this idea of FLOSS, or free software. So just a very brief introduction to what is FLOSS. It is three components. FLOSS is one term, also known as FOSS, which tries to encompass all the different flavors of community-oriented user as programmer software. And it stands for Free Libre Open Source Software. And so there's kind of two categories of free software. And there's the free software side and there's the open source software side. As we all know, the open source one seems to have domination. Most people have heard of open source, but maybe free software is not as known ago. But the Free Software Foundation started in 1985 and really was the foundation of everything that we know of as free and open source software. In 1998, a group of people decided that free software wasn't a useful marketing tool. And so open source software was born as a way of larger corporations and free software organizations making free software something that could be marketed to more people. So that's where the open source initiative came from. They both have slightly different definitions of what free software is, but I'm going to stick with the simpler one, which is the Free Software Foundation. So when we say free in terms of free software, free doesn't refer to how much money you pay. And in fact, you can pay for free software. People can charge you for it. And because the freedom is not about how much the software costs, it's about your rights as a user. Whereas if you're using, let's say, Adobe Photoshop or Final Cut Pro or something, there's always that lovely legal text when you install it that has all the terms and conditions. So that sets out what your rights actually are. So this is the version for free software, which pretty well is the same for all